and welcome to the fifth in our Faculty Forum series hosted by the Music Therapy Faculty Forum Steering Committee. I'm Andrew Knight, an Associate Professor of Music Therapy at Colorado State University. Along with Vicky Vega at Loyola University, we co-chair the Steering Committee, a group of 8 educators looking to host these forums to support music therapy educators and provide a space for important conversations around music therapy education. In addition to the two of us, I'd like to make sure that you know the rest of the committee: Susie Sorrell from Malloy, Melanie Kwan from Washington Adventist, Jan Schreibman from the University of Indianapolis, Raquel Ravaioli from Marietta College, Debbie Gombert from Eastern Michigan University, and Andy McGraw-Hunt from Rowan University. In particular, Debbie and I were the liaisons from the committee putting together tonight's event. The mandate of the steering committee is to look at a future organizational structure for shared faculty governance and to create these kind of events to engage in the tasks of the steering committee, which are to establish trust, build community, and create avenues for conversation, to be conscientious of not taking a side on issues, and to serve as a liaison between faculty and AMTA. We have been and will continue to be a group that encourages open and collegial conversation amongst all participants while maintaining independence from AMTA and any other formal music therapy body. We have just one announcement before we begin, which we will repeat at the wrap-up, and that is to join us also on April 12th at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, for a conversation the steering committee has put together featuring Lillian Eyre and Tony Meadows on the topic of the CBMT exam. If you have topics to suggest to us for future events, email any of us individually or at musictherapyfaculty@gmail.com. Again, it goes musictherapyfaculty, all one word, @gmail.com. So tonight we're going to start with Dr. Laurie Gooding from Florida State University, who chairs the AMTA COVID-19 Task Force in her role as president-elect. As she joined us back in our August event, and as an educator herself, we are happy to have her again address the group to tell us more about the progress of the task force and what educators should know about that. Debbie and I were invited to take part in a task force meeting earlier this month, and some terms that kept on coming up in the conversation were compassion and capacity, the title for this event. It's a good reminder for all of us to consider our own capacities in these times and to do what we can to live with compassion for the people we serve, teach, and work with. This is part 1 of Compassion and Capacity. The steering committee will be looking at ways to follow up from this event and schedule part 2 later this spring. But for now, I'll turn it over to Dr. Laurie Gooding.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for giving me this chance to talk to you about the work of the task force. I want to just acknowledge a couple of task force members that are also here tonight before we get started. So I saw Barb Else, and there she is. Her square just switched. And then Heather Wagner is here as well. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you some slides with all of the task force members on it, so you'll be able to see who they are and be able to reach out to them if you need any points of contact. So we're actually going to do 2 things tonight. I'm going to start by giving you some updates that are important for you to know as educators. And then Barb is going to be coming just a little bit later and talking to you about a survey that we helped put together and launch, and the preliminary results from that. Right? So give me just a second to share my screen, and we'll get started. I think, Andrew, you guys are going to have to give me permission to do so.
I think Raquel's on that. Why don't you give that a shot now?
All right, so here we go. Okay, so just real quickly here, so you can see all of the members of the task force. We have Seneca Block, Andrea Dalton, Barb, who I mentioned earlier, me, David Knott, Rochelle Morgan, and Heather, who I also mentioned earlier. So we tried to have a blend of educators, clinicians, a blend of practice areas, healthcare, private practice, et cetera, and from different areas within the country so that we could get a lot of representation and also a lot of input based on those different areas. Now, these are the standing members of the task force, but they are certainly not the only people that we work with, and we regularly bring in other people. As Andrew just mentioned, he and Debbie came in for a meeting. We met with APAC and AAC. Jane Cregan is here tonight, who also has been working with us in various capacities. So we regularly bring in any experts or additional persons that we need to supplement the knowledge base that we have. So one of the first things I want to share with you is that the resource pages for the task force have been updated, and those have been updated to make them a little bit more user-friendly. So now there's a landing page, and I will get either this or a Word doc out to Andrew and Debbie so that they can share it with you all that has the link on it. So you can see it, but you can see it here printed on the screen as well. The updates have really made it much more usable. So now you hit the landing page, there's the contact information, and then there's links to area-specific pages with all of the information. For example, one of them is infection prevention and control, and that's just an example of one of them. So it's something that you can hopefully use yourself and then also use with your students in your courses and or in the clinical training opportunities. We also just did a AMTA Community Conversations webinar. So this was the first of a new series by AMTA called Community Conversations, and the task force was the first guest for this. We actually ran the webinar twice, and the second webinar just happened on the 25th, and the video is available on the AMTA YouTube channel. And there's updates on a variety of things: hot topics, vaccines, masking, PPP loans, CMS updates, technology, and a number of other topics. We also answered questions from the music therapy community as part of this webinar, so you can see and hear answers to some of the common questions. And many of the questions that we get relate to clinical decision-making in a time of COVID. So this would, again, be another resource that could be really helpful with the clinical training aspect, or at least we hope it's helpful for you all. We also recently put out a video called Ongoing Grief in the Pandemic, Honoring a Year. And this was with Heather Wagner, Lauren DeMeo, and Molly Hicks. And so they did a lovely discussion of ongoing grief. And then Molly provided a ritual to honor a year of dealing with the pandemic. So the video is roughly about 25 minutes long or so. So it's another great resource. One, to just acknowledge the grief that we have all experienced in this ever-changing situation that is COVID. And then also to really start to talk about strategies for coping with the grief and the ongoing effects and continued effects that we're all dealing with in terms of grief and other aspects related to that. Right? So this video is also on the AMTA YouTube channel and can also be another great resource for you and your students. So I'm going to stop sharing now and just update you on a few more things that are hopefully applicable to you in your role as educators and supervisors. We continue to develop resources, and so if you go to those web pages, the resource web pages, you'll be able to click on the links like the infection prevention and control that I mentioned, and then go to very specific resources related to infection prevention and control. For example, we just uploaded one that's an infection control cleaning manual from Eastman Music Company. That's a brand new release. So providing those kinds of things that you can use yourselves, but you can also provide to your students as they continue to seek those clinical training opportunities during COVID. Those web pages, in addition to being cleaned up and made more user-friendly, we're also in the process of removing some broken links and things. So continue to check those as we continue to update them to make sure that they stay accurate. If at any point you see something that doesn't work that you need access to, go to that landing page and you can reach out to any of us. Our contact information is there, and we can help facilitate you gaining access to those different resources. We also partnered with Jane, as I mentioned earlier, Debbie and Andrew from the Faculty Steering Committee, and APAC and AAC to work on gathering more information about clinical training in the time of COVID. And so through those conversations, we put together a survey that hopefully many of you took, and Barb is in just a few minutes going to share some of the data that was collected, or the data that were collected during the survey. In addition to that survey, we're now moving on to part 2, and we're doing some interviews with clinical supervisors to get more information, not only on what's happening now, but what are some of the needs that we foresee for the future in terms of clinical training. So trying to get a better grasp on what types of resources and supports might be needed both in the immediate and then moving forward in the future. And the task force will compile that information and then give that information to groups like APAC and AAC, so that then decisions that need to be made can go to those standing committees to facilitate that decision-making process. So please watch for interview requests. We're just doing a small group right now, but we may be asking in the not so distant future for you all to help connect us with clinical training supervisors and directors in order to get more information. And we're trying to get a balance of both university affiliated and national roster internships in that. Right? And then, of course, as I mentioned, we are doing ongoing resource development, and those get posted as they become available. So we're currently working on some clinical decision-making materials based on the questions we've gotten around COVID. They seem to be stemming from clinical decision-making content. So things like masking, vaccine, et cetera. And then we're also working on some technology information as well, and working with the technology committee to also try to facilitate that. Because as I mentioned, our role is to really be the connector and provide the resources and the support. So we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to help facilitate the work of the standing committees that exist. So as always, if you have questions or need information, please reach out. We are happy to have conversations and happy to facilitate anything that you need that we can help you with. If you have ideas of things that we haven't covered, please let us know that as well, and we can take a look. We meet regularly. The task force meets basically every week, and so we can be pretty nimble and quick in response if needed. So thank you again for allowing me to come and talk to you. As I said earlier, I'll make sure that Andrew and Debbie get either the PowerPoint or the Word doc that I have with the same information in it, so that it can go out to you all so that you can easily access all of those links. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laurie. I'm sorry, was there something? Oh, I thought I heard another comment. So next, Barb Else and Jane Cragen are joining us from AMTA. Many of you know Jane as the AMTA Education and Training Director, and Barb wears many hats. You may know her in a role of consultant, policy advisor, and or as the business manager of AMTA Journals. Tonight, Barb and Jane are sharing preliminary results of the AMTA survey of educators and supervisors regarding issues that we faced during COVID-19. Laurie spoke about that a little while ago. And a special thank you to Heather Wagner for inviting me and Andrew to the meeting of the COVID task force where we first heard these preliminary results. And in case you joined late, I just want to restate that this faculty forum has been and will continue to be a group that encourages open and collegial conversation amongst participants while maintaining independence from AMTA and from any other formal music therapy body. With that, thank you to AMTA for your commitment to supporting faculty during this time. And thank you to Barb and Jane for joining us tonight.
Great. Hello, everybody, from both me and Jane. And at AMTA. I've got some slides to share based on the survey. We use the SurveyMonkey account. So as Laurie said, the COVID task force is the connector, and I'm the conduit to the SurveyMonkey account. So that's why I'm presenting. So let me pull those up for you. Can you see that? Thank you. All right. Won't be able to see all my notes, but that'll work okay. Hang on here. There we go. So on this survey, we tried to tackle hearing from faculty, and thank you all for filling out the SurveyMonkey, as well as intern supervisors and directors. We had 91 faculty that responded and 156 clinical supervisors. Won't let me advance. Hang on a sec. Try it one more time. it's stuck. I'll try one more time. Maybe I'll just run it in this mode.
Barb, did you try both the mouse and the computer to advance it? Because sometimes one locks up when you get on Zoom. Like try either the mouse or the computer to advance it.
Sure, I don't have a mouse. So I'm gonna run it like this. Can you all still see it? Can you still see it, Jean Ann?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to run it like this. I had trouble the other day too. Apologies for that. So first I'm going to talk about the faculty very briefly. The faculty member responses. The survey was set up in basically two sections. There were about 4 professionals who have a function because they could be adjunct at a facility, but they are also clinical supervisors in a field, in the field. All the regions were represented. We had the most faculty responses from Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, and Southeastern region. Pre-pandemic, how many pre-internship sites did you have was one of the initial substantive questions. 65% of the respondents noted pre-internship, preclinical pre-internship sites ranging in 6 to 20 range, to give you just a sense of the numbers, although there was a wide range from less than that to a whole lot from some of the really large programs. 65% are having trouble finding or securing pre-internship sites. In a direct question on that. Have you lost any pre-internship sites due to COVID-19 restrictions? 84% they've had what they believe is a temporary loss to pre-internship or practica sites. 15.5% said they've had both temporary and some permanent losses that they know of. There was a question asking about pre-internship site populations that might be permanently lost or closed. And that average was 21%. 70% of the respondents, or 28 folks, said none were lost permanently. So there's some variation in that, but a lot of people think that these could be or they're hoping they're temporary losses. The types of pre-internship setting or populations temporarily closed. I want to draw your attention actually on the small bars, not the longest ones. That's early, and it's really small print. I apologize for that. That's early intervention. Private practice is small as well. School is still there. So private practice had to pivot and shift and diversify to sustain their businesses. In the COVID task force discussion with our representative to the music therapy business owners, they moved quickly to shift because they have to stay in business to keep their income stream going. Early intervention, one theory behind this one, why it was not as closed as much, is it's considered essential early on in the pandemic. So in terms of the other category, substance abuse was programs closed or temporarily closed, but this also varied by the setting and the abilities to support telehealth. One question, if you have temporarily lost pre-internship sites, when do you anticipate that the majority of sites will return? Some thoughts were all over the board, but a lot of people are hoping for the fall of 2021. There is a cohort of respondents, faculty, that said after we reach a threshold of vaccination, it may look promising. But for many of the other comments that people added to the survey, uncertainty remained, they're not sure, or it's actually just unknown. So that remains an open question for a lot of people, though I think we are making some progress. In thinking about pre-internship hours for your students at this time, the question asks about your relative reliance on each option in the scale, and they ask for percentage. So this is asking about telehealth or clinical videos or simulation or virtual, face-to-face. But the bottom line is here in this really small graph is a significant 75% of the respondents, more than that slightly, rely on, said their telehealth was a high proportion of their activity. There was minimal reliance on clinical videos, but a little bit, and minimal reliance, but a little bit on simulation or virtual, similar to, and some of that included similar to a nursing simulation lab in some universities that have access to that kind of facility. Are students having trouble securing internship placements? 68% of you said yes. So that's basically confirms anecdotally what we were hearing, and that there is a significant portion that are struggling with this. You indicated, of those who indicated difficulty in securing internships, check which models were affected, meaning university affiliated, national register, both. 74% said both are affected. This chart, I'm sure, is rather small the way it's showing to you right now, but for each category of internship, university affiliated or national registry, it asked to indicate the number of students affected by internship, either cancellation, being paused or on hold, or accepted for the internship, but they delayed the start date. I put some colored circles around a couple of the scales, noting that that's where the majority of responses are, but basically 1 to 4 internship sites was the majority response rate. AMTA doesn't have access to data on the current number of university affiliated internships, and Jane and I were talking about this morning. If you look at national registry only, however, where we do know, and we have a denominator of 172 sites, I think that's correct, Jane, as of this morning, 172. The chart shows 31
Yes.
students, or 18% of national registry sites that were not canceled, paused, or accepted but delayed. So that, therefore, approximately 82% of the students, at least representing the ones that were responding by faculty here, have been affected based on the sample of response. I did some number calculations just based on these rough responses from everybody. And that would be a minimum of 99 students being canceled from the cohort of people that responded to this question. I think it's actually a pretty significant number when you think about that, you think it through. For internship eligible students, indicate the average amount of delay for internship. 69% of responders noted intern start delays of 1 to 6 months, 42% 4 to 6 month delay. The relative impact of these delays on the internship start dates, we hypothesized a couple areas based on feedback from students, interns, and professionals that have contacted the task force and Jane, and a significant impact or extremely high impact, where I have shaded there, showed up for graduation dates, has an impact on that, students' income, and students' housing or living arrangements. I think it's possible that interpretation of some aspects or factors on this question, as faculty interpreted the question as asked, might have been a consideration because of the percentage that said it's not a factor, but I'm not really sure. International student visa status and scholarships were noted to have an impact, but lesser so. But keep in mind that could be reflecting the lower numbers of people in those categories. Still is an important issue. Indicate the number of student interns currently working in each category of internship, meaning full-time telehealth, mixed telehealth plus face-to-face, or face-to-face only. And mixed was the highest category, although there's distribution quite all over the place in terms of the number of students, and it's happening all over all of those categories. And then here's a side-by-side of both cohorts that took the survey. Which resources have you utilized to help students meet pre-internship and or internship hours? On the left-hand side, at least it's my left, I don't remember if this is being mirrored to you, the faculty over on this side. Educator website is that second category, the one from the top. Contact with committee chairs is one of these small categories right here, just in case you can read it. But my point is, people are using all kinds of resources, any and all, faculty especially. In the other category, collaboration with other university music therapy programs, continuing education, as well as webinars, case studies, and research in the literature that's emerging. On the clinical supervisors and internship directors side, likewise, they're using the task force. They're reaching out to colleagues and doing a lot of networking here, as well as the committees, which both groups are using. So it's good to see that. Please indicate the region. And here we're talking about the clinical supervisors. We had 96 internship supervisors, 4 who are clinical supervisors only, and 4 that do both internship director and clinical supervision. 58 that do both internship and clinical supervision. So it's a mix. For these clinical supervisors, are COVID-19 restrictions at your facility limiting the number of in-person pre-internship students you can take? And a little over 60% said yes. So that correlates with the problems you're seeing on the faculty side and trying to find practical experiences. Are COVID restrictions currently preventing you from hosting in-person pre-internship students? 57% said yes, but a good proportion said no. 36, 37%, right in there. If you've reduced in-person practica, when do you anticipate that face-to-face practica will return to pre-pandemic levels? Again, it's all over the place, and some people have no idea. Not sure, there's a good deal of uncertainty, but there is a group saying we're hopeful for the fall of 2021 and after vaccination. And I'll just have a few more slides here, and then that'll be it. Would you be able to offer new additional in-person observations? A small percentage said yes, but the majority said no, not right now. Are you able to do telehealth for or with pre-internship students? And a higher percentage said yes, so about 57% there. Have you, internship supervisors, had to change your start date for new interns due to the pandemic? And that was almost a split, 50-50. But we are seeing some people that have to do that. Have you had to place your program on inactive status or suspend it temporarily? And about 22% said yes. And Jane can confirm that. And she is posting weekly changes in status for all of these internship sites, at least for the National Registry. Please indicate an estimated time frame when you anticipate being active. And again, this is all over the place. But I think it's noteworthy that the internship supervisors, because they are all pushing and driving forward, adapting their sites to meet intern need or demand, retain their internships, and comply with the pandemic protocols. Excuse me. Are you able to have interns on site? 80+% said yes. Are you able to train interns through telehealth? 60% yes. This is a big pivot and shift for the practice. Much smaller number of therapists were doing telemusic therapy prior to the pandemic, and has implications probably for education and training going forward. Does your internship site also host practica students? And we had a little over 40% yes. And there's some that are doing some shifting to be able to take on a few more, but as reflected in that question earlier, not as many, but they're looking at it. Do you have the capacity to temporarily host new or additional practica students at your internship site? 30% yes. If you were hosting them, could you host in-person, telehealth, or both? And both is definitely a possibility, with 60% there. And that was my last slide. Trying to race through those slides for you there. To give you a sense of just some very basic information we asked, the next steps that we're preparing to do is to do some targeted discussions, chats with internship directors to get an array of different populations. We've had some internship directors talk to the COVID-19 task force informally about possibly trends they're seeing in some gaps that might be showing up because of this shift that we've had to do. So we're trying to take a look at that and work with Jane and the committees and you all to see what we're seeing and if it's significant or not. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Barb. I just wanted to also toss it to you, Jane, if you had any commentary, or anything like that to on the survey.
I have, thanks, Andrew, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I have just a couple of comments. One, the information that I'm hearing from national roster internship directors regarding, coming back online is pretty consistent with the survey. A lot anticipate the fall. I've also heard from some that are going to, that are moving their start dates to early 2022. So, so again, coming back online and hoping to be fully back early next year. So that's good news in that they've only temporarily, their stop has been temporary. There also right now there are 17 national roster internship sites that are inactive. So they have stopped for a little while. 3 of those have returned back to active status. So I'm hopeful that we'll see the rest come back to active status also, so that we can add to 172, as Barb said, is the active sites right now, that are taking students.
Great, thank you very much. I also see Laura put something in the chat that was slides for the survey are very interesting. Could they be put in a PDF for us? Is that possible, Barb? Oh, I'm sorry. You already answered that. There we go. Okay, you'll coordinate with Laurie, and then just for all of us here too, we'll have the links that Laurie was also putting in the chat. We have a follow-up survey. We're going to send all that stuff out in an email, and then, like we said before at the top, we'll have a recording of this event as well, and make sure that that link goes out so that everybody can have access to it as well. Last on our list of presenters is a trio who presented a wonderful bit of qualitative research on the student educational experience. I happened to catch it as they were presenting online at the combined Great Lakes and Midwestern Regional Conference that was earlier this month, and I'm really happy that they're able to tell us about their study. So this is Annie, Ju-Young, and Emma. I'll turn it over to you, whoever is ready to start the presentation for you 3.
Sure. So hi, my name is Emma Munir, and I am the clinical practicum supervisor and coordinator at Augsburg University in Minneapolis. And I'll be presenting this today with my colleague Ju-Young Lee, who is an assistant professor of music at Augsburg as well. So we really are just here to talk a little bit and present some research about what happened at Augsburg when we had to move into COVID-19 mode. And we did that by moving into a telehealth music therapy space across the board. So,
are you looking at the PDF, PPT, Emma?
Yes, I am. Can others see it?
Yeah. Should I make it bigger?
Sure.
Okay, sure. Let me see. I don't know. Is it better or let me see.
I'm not seeing any difference.
Is it better now?
So now just change the share screen so that it's not on the presentation part, because that was right, but then you have to just share a different screen so that it's the full slide instead of the presenter setup.
Okay, I will do it again. Sorry.
That's okay. The name of the event is Compassion and Capacity. It's fine.
Okay, so maybe this is better now.
That is better.
Emma?
That is better.
Okay, so I will go the next.
Excellent. So I think it's no surprise to any of you that COVID-19 really changed what practicum had to look like in terms of clinical practice. And students and interns in most of the settings in which we were working were stopped. And we also had the university shutdown happen in March of last year. And so we had restrictions about what we could actually require students to be doing from the university perspective, as well as what sites had availability for students to be engaged. So this really required us as faculty to explore lots of options for practica with no or very few community clinical sites available. Next slide, Julia. Thank you. Okay, so we really had one aim, which was to maintain safety across the board. Of course, whenever we're placing people in practica, we're looking at the safety of clients, and that was primary. But we also needed to maintain the safety of the students and of the clinical supervisors within that space. So those were really our primary aims in moving forward. So as the clinical coordinator, I really looked at how to put together practicum work that could engage the students in these 5 categories of work. The first was just to ensure high quality practicum experience. And we wanted to do that in a way that would actually increase student competence and not add only to the bookwork side of things, but not to the clinical work side of things, the sort of hands-on stuff. We also wanted to provide high quality clinical work with a variety of client populations. And we were able to support increased access to music therapy services for clients who might not have been able to receive music therapy in other times and spaces. So clients who were located in more rural areas, clients who didn't have the funds to pay for music therapy services, those kinds of things. We were also looking to enable students to observe the practice of music therapy in settings that they're often unable to see within practicum. So we know that music psychotherapy and GIM practice and things like that can be difficult to have an observer present in, and switching to telehealth made it a little bit easier to incorporate student engagement in those kind of experiences. We also wanted to provide a forum for exploring telehealth because it was at that moment the face of therapeutic practice almost in total. And I think that it will continue to represent some portion of the face of music therapy practice as we move forward. So I started to work trying to put together some telehealth practica. And in that moment, when everything shut down, what we really needed to do was put something together quickly. Lots of our clinical sites that we were used to partnering with did not have immediate access to telehealth platforms, were not yet equipped to move into those kinds of experiences. And so we decided to take that on as a university program. And so what we did was we set up 3 clinical practica that we recorded via Zoom. So each one of the full-time faculty within the Augsburg program worked with one practicum site and one group of practicum students. And so in order to do that, we needed to set up lots of things. Thank you so much, Ju Young, for keeping track of where I am. So the first were the legal and ethical requirements. So we had to change the way we trained around HIPAA. We had to make sure that when students were accessing the recordings that we were putting together, they were doing it in private places, with earphones, in spaces where the confidentiality of the clients was not compromised in any way. We had to get all of those informed consent forms together and reviewed by the university legal program in order to make sure that we had sort of all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted. And we also needed to put together recording use contracts, so agreements with our clients about what we were going to be doing, how these recordings were going to be used, and for how long they were going to be kept and reused throughout the process. Then I jumped into initial client recruitment. So a lot of that happened through my own private practice. And within my own private practice, I had several referring agencies that I was used to using on a regular basis. I did use some of my private practice clients in these practicum experiences as well. I also put together some blurbs for social media groups. It was a really quick way to get the word out about what we were looking to do and what clients needed to be able to agree to in order to qualify for free services through this practicum experience. So I posted in an ASD parents group. I posted in a group for parents of kids with attachment disorders. And I also posted in a space for caregivers and folks dealing with caregiving of all types. And got lots of referrals from that. We ended up with nearly 70 referrals in all and picked through them all to try and figure out how to create groups and individuals that would be appropriate for this. And then we made invitations to participate based on clinical appropriateness, music therapist expertise between the three faculty, and the ability of the clients to really commit to the process that we were engaging them in. So, like I said, we came up with 25 telehealth practicums. We had, or I should say practica. We had 25 undergraduate and graduate students that were assigned during this particular semester. Many of our students sort of immediately decided to step back and try to wait for their next practicum experience, hoping that the world would go back to normal and we would be able to get them back into in-person sites. Of course, things haven't rolled out in that way, but we were placing significantly fewer students in that first semester than we typically do. So we had 25 undergrad and grad students, and the three groups or individuals that we were working with within these spaces were first an adult with high levels of stress and anxiety who was a caregiver of 4 children with special needs. And within that space, Annie Heiderscheit was engaging in GIM via telehealth. We had a child with ASD, mild anxiety, and sensory disorder, who were worked with by Ju-Young Lee. And then we had 3 siblings with attachment disorders who were in a new adoption situation after having been in lots of foster care sites and settings across their short time spans. And I worked with that group. We recorded every session and used Google Drives to save those recorded telehealth sessions, along with postludes and debriefing videos that were offered by the music therapy faculty, and lots of written documentation that we were creating along the way. And the students were able to gain access to those through the HIPAA compliant version of Google Drives, which is a little bit more expensive, but was well worth it for the purposes of this experience. And of course, students received weekly groups or supervision within the class context as well.
Thank you, Emma.
Mm-hmm.
So because it was very first telehealth practicum we offered as a university, we really wanted to understand students' experiences. So we have conducted focus group interviews. So the 25 students who fulfill the following inclusion criteria were invited. So the students observed telehealth sessions at least 8 times, they were invited. And then ethics approval was offered by Augsburg University. And then we had 2 focus group interviews, and each group lasted for 1 hour. A total of 13 students participated. So 6 students were in group 1 and 7 students were in group 2. And 6 students had previous experience in-person practicums, but 7 students, it was their very first practicum. So we feel like it's, the students had various well-balanced views on this topic. We asked questions, basically, how was your experience? Can you share positive experience or challenging experiences? Or what's useful in the guidance of the faculty or clinical supervisor, or what's not useful? Also, we asked, do you have any suggestion for the future semesters? Because we thought we're gonna offer several more telehealth practicums. We used thematic analysis to analyze the text interview data. So I did the first analysis, so identifying key statements and searching for themes and then reviewing themes. And then Annie and Emma reviewed the outcome, and then through discussion, we made some changes. And then I will share the result. So, first we found about 5 positive and useful aspects of telehealth practicums. So first one was watching sessions multiple times on my pace. So that was the first positive thing about telehealth practicums. So, 5 students out of 13 students mentioned about this. So because, like the folder had all the sessions, students were able to watch sessions over and over, or even within one session, they were able to go back and watch certain section repeatedly, when they cannot understand or they wanted to have a close look. So that was a good thing about telehealth. Second one was therapist postlude. So sometimes students were, especially the students who had previous experience in in-person practicums, they thought, it was very hard to ask questions after the session. And sometimes it was very busy, so they didn't find good time to ask meaningful questions. But because they understood telehealth really in depth and then listened to the therapist postlude, they were able to then better questions when they come to the supervision. Third positive thing was having a group of students watching same sessions together. So that was a bit different from in person as well. Like you are the only one student watching a session, but with telehealth, there was at least like 5 students watching your same, therapy. So they were able to exchange views, different opinions, just pure observation and to hone observation skills. So, it's purely observational practice, and some students really enjoyed this aspect. Sometimes, when it was the first time practicum, they were a little bit scared going and meeting the clients for the first time. But through this telehealth, they felt much safe, and, they were able to have this time to understand clients and the music therapy process. The fifth one was, 4 students mentioned it is actually really great for first practicum students. So the steps involved, like establishing a rapport and going through the whole process, that was really helpful. So sometimes when they go to the in-person, it's like existing programs. So it's hard to observe the first several sessions where the therapists take initial assessment and build rapport. They were not able to watch that, but through this telehealth, they were able to watch that from the beginning. Challenging aspect, not being able to practice clinical skills. because it was a pure observational practicum, it was a bit hard for them to actually, use those clinical skills in the session. Because of time, I'm not reading these, but I'm happy to share this PDF if you want. Second challenging aspect was no direct connections with clients. So for students, mostly who did the first practicum, they said they really enjoyed meeting clients in person, but then through telehealth, there was no opportunity to meet the clients in person. So they actually thought that's not the best thing. There was one suggestion for future practicum, the need of more student involvement in the live telehealth or in-person practicum. So some students thought, they are learning better through in-person, but some students was hoping even a live telehealth practicum will be better. So after this focus group interview, we actually made some change, and then we were able to invite students to live health practicum in spring semester. So that's the outcome, and then Emma will share some of our reflections as faculty.
Thank you, Ju Young. So we had lots of things that we were excited about as part of this process. And a huge one was that we had a variety of clinical settings. And so we were able to show 3 separate clinical environments, and we were able to have students interact in more than one clinical population, which was really nice. But we did find that we didn't have time for in-depth discussions in practicums. I'm sorry, when they were doing in-person practicums, when there wasn't time for in-depth discussion. We did have time for that within the telehealth sphere of things. Students really liked the postlude videos that we created, and we were able to provide extra resources within that space as well. We also think that THP is good for first practicum students. That's telehealth practicum, I'm sorry, because it's effective in sort of screening students. We have students within this space that didn't necessarily have access to live clients, and sometimes that's a good thing, obviously not with the majority of students, but occasionally we all know we come across students who need some remedial assistance, who need some maybe personal therapy, some need to pay some attention to their own personal facilities in order to move forward. And this enabled a really nice way for us to target those individuals and help them to work through things while still being engaged in a practicum experience. And they were able to learn to really mindfully think about those things and make meaning of what they were working with. This also changed the way that we thought about how we will move forward in the future. So for example, we have a music therapy equivalency program at the master's level, in which we have students across the country because we work on a hybrid model, typically with or without the pandemic. So because of that, we do occasionally have students who, for example, live in very small towns or very rural areas where we have to ask students to commute long distances to get to a practicum site. This could be a nice way to move forward with that, and could be not only helpful for the students, but also for clients who might not be able to access. This is a possibility that we didn't use before. This was also a huge learning experience for us as faculty. None of us had engaged in telehealth before, so we were all sort of learning as we went. And it has really informed where we've gone since we collected this data, and we will be collecting more data as far as how to structure these experiences, how to make sure that the students are actively engaged in the music making and in the clinical decision making within these spaces. So that has been really great.
That's it.
That's
Thank
it.
you for listening, everyone.
Thank you so much. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so sorry, I think there was a last slide. If you have any question, you can email me at this email address.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. So as there we go. So Emma and Ju Young, thank you so much for sharing your work and for presenting what you found. So we're hoping that these 3 different presentations really got you thinking about various aspects of education. And we want to get into breakout rooms now to share some ideas and then bring them forth to the larger faculty forum. So go ahead, Andrew.
So here is our breakout room plan. We'll be randomizing everyone. Raquel's on the controls for that. We're going to randomize everyone into breakout rooms to try to keep the groups as small as we can based on the number of moderators that we have from our steering committee. And the moderators are just going to keep time and try to just reintroduce the topics and help organize the reporting out to the whole group later. So give us just a few moments to do this randomization and then to move the moderators into the various Zoom rooms. And that this part of the evening will not be recorded. The moderators are asked to discuss 4 main questions, and you can see them in the chat right now. And these are kind of the questions and topic areas that we'd like you to give us your thoughts on, and then the steering committee will be collating all these kind of summary points as we go forward for part 2 of the event, and then we'll be able to come back and tell you kind of how everything shook out. So the 4 main points: what aspects of teaching during the pandemic do we as music therapy educators want to keep going forward? What have been the biggest lessons learned about the nature of music therapy education? What are our remaining concerns about music therapy education as we look to how this period of time has affected our students? And then lastly, what additional support do we need or questions do we have? So moderators, please go ahead and follow the lead of your group in whatever way makes most sense for everyone there. Please copy the questions from the chat. Just go ahead in there and then Command-C or whatever so you can copy them and paste them into your own individual breakout room. So when you go out to your breakout room, you won't be able to see those questions. If anyone on the steering committee, any of the moderators have any questions, go ahead and get it and send me a message in Slack or something, and I will be able to send those out to you. Or consider other ways that some individuals might take notes to report out. So I'd like the moderators just, they'll be keeping time and everything like I mentioned, but if there's a volunteer from each group that is willing to take some notes, and then we would like to have a copy of those notes sent to musictherapyfaculty@gmail.com. And we can keep reminding you about that. We'll put it back in the chat at the end of the event tonight. And please make sure that you have a spokesperson to share with the group. If we have a little bit of time at the end when we rejoin together, and we'll just see how time goes for that. So we're at the top of the hour right now. We'd like to do this breakout session for about 20 minutes. So 20 past the hour, then we'll send out a little reminder, and then that'll close down the breakout rooms, and then everyone will just come back here, and then we will wrap up from there. So that's it for now, and we'll get on to the randomization process. Everyone can go ahead and join your rooms.
Hi Raquel, I just got here from a trip home, so I'm not sure what breakout room I should be in.
Okay.
I was listening on the phone in my car and we just pulled in.
No problem. I'll assign you.
Thank you.
Are we all back? It looks like we all are back. Well, welcome back to the main room. So we do want to take a little bit of time to hear from each of the groups. And we've already started the recording of the event again. So I think rather than, we're not going to have time to hear all of the items from the groups. So perhaps the spokesperson from each group can just share either highlights or the most salient points from your breakout room. And I'm going to go in order of the, I don't remember what group number I was in. I'm going to go in order of the moderators. Well, some people know. Do people know what group they were in? Nah. Okay, we'll go by moderator. And I'm going in pretty much alphabetical order by moderator name. So, Andrew, do you want to share what your group, if you were the spokesperson or whoever the spokesperson was for your group?
Sure. Leslie was our recorder, so I'll ask Leslie just to say a couple of the notes that we took on our questions.
So yeah, minute or two.
Sure. So some of the biggest things were just that, the opportunities that exist from this forced change. We found ourselves in somewhat of a rut, and because we were forced to have to think creatively, it got us thinking about ways for our field that could really have a positive impact in growth for both education, but also service delivery for the future. The expansion nationally and internationally, looking at that in some states we have 1, 2, and 3 programs, but there's a whole big rest of the part of the state, or even states that don't have programs, and internationally where they need music therapy. So telehealth really opened that up. It opened up over the lines where you could go over a state line and get a supervisor or a placement over telehealth that you didn't used to previously. The difference between online and planned online and remote, that was emergency basis, where students struggled with connectivity, life stressors, depression, family members that were ill, and that there are big differences, and that true online could be a real advantage for our field and open up things that we hadn't considered before.
Great. Thank you. Anything else from that group, or can we go on to Andy's?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Andy, I don't know who your spokesperson was, or if you were.
I will be, because everyone was just tired today, so I took care of my group. So in agreement with what Leslie shared, some other points we brought up, I think everyone was feeling that, yeah, while there's some great advantages to telehealth and remote teaching and online teaching, I think one of the things we really still need, that has been missing, of course, is that live spontaneous interaction with music and other people, not just timing wise, but also just seeing the whole human form, and nonverbal communication, things that just, it's just not possible through video conferencing right now. Bunch of us noticed that, as far as some other concerns, that students are having their learning has been affected, just in terms of going through all this trauma. They're having a hard time focusing. They've been dealing with a lot of grief, a lot of huge life changes at once. And this has affected how we're teaching, the amount of attention span we can count on in a class, like the kinds of things we bring into the class, to get people to engage. You all know the Zoom fishbowl syndrome. So how much of that are we going to have to continue adapting to? And just then dealing with all that loss and grief that I think Leslie was bringing up too. And wouldn't it be great if we could develop like a real-time music platform? Because telehealth is here to stay, and that was genuinely like capture in-time musical experiences in video. Who knows if AMTA could like help facilitate that, bring in the players who could develop that kind of platform. That would be super cool. But, you can think about it.
I could interject. We just had our NASM visit today, and one of the accreditors talked about one that's being used at their university. I can try and pass that along. They're using it for their lessons.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Andy. Jan? your group, highlights from your group?
Sure. Blythe took notes for us, but she had a little bit of interruptions, so I'll go ahead and read, but jump in if I misstate something, the rest of the group. The flexibility for our students was highlighted as if they had to, what would have traditionally been a missed class for illness or whatever, they still had an opportunity to attend based on the platforms that we might have been using. Doing tests in the learning system that was used by the university seemed to be a benefit as well. Providing the breakout room opportunities on Zoom were very helpful, as well as chat features when using Zoom platform or a platform for telehealth, that the student could receive a private chat about an improvement that they might be able to make in real time. Again, music making, as Andy was saying, was a little difficult in real time. The worries for what we need as faculty, the equitable faculty load, if how we are affected by the additional time that it takes for some of these endeavors that we found ourselves in this year. And I think those are the feeling disconnected from students. It seemed to make a difference if they were graduate students versus undergraduates. The undergraduates seemed to really struggle where the graduates maybe were a little more successful, was the take from my group. And if I missed anything, jump in.
I also, thank you, Jan. I also want to respect that it's 9:28. So I think Andrew needs 1 minute to close everything up. I just want to open up then if any of the other groups want to add, we have sort of 1 minute to add. If there's something that you really feel like you want to say to the whole group, we will be sharing those notes then to the whole faculty forum. Are there any other? Keeping in mind that we will be sharing our notes.
I'll just quickly interject one thing, kind of going off what Jan was saying. One of the things that we were talking about for additional support was help from AMTA, just providing some guidance so that we can talk to our administrators really about the faculty ratio and loads, specifically practicum. That's definitely a concern to help them understand how time consuming it really is compared to, some of the other credit hours.
Thank you, Katie. Great.
Debbie, can I just pop in? That's
Yes.
a conversation I've already started with Adonia, providing different support, different or more extensive support for faculty to make arguments for things like course loads and faculty loads and stuff. So those conversations have started. They're still early, but they have definitely started.
Thank you, Laurie. Anything else, especially while we have Laurie and Jane are still here, and I don't know if Barb still is or not. In the last 30 seconds, anything else that people want to add? So moderators, we will be sharing our notes then with the faculty forum so that we can all look at what the outcomes were from various meetings, the breakout rooms. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thanks, Debbie, for facilitating this last little part here. Also, thank you to Laurie Gooding, Barb Else, Jane Cregan, Annie Heiderscheit, Juyong Lee, and Emma Munir, and to all of you for joining us. On behalf of the rest of the steering committee, we thank all of you for attending and taking an active role tonight. We've asked everyone to take a short survey at the end of each of these faculty forum events. That link is in the chat. We'll put it on the Music Therapy Faculty Facebook page, and it'll be coming to you in a follow-up email that also has some of these other links and resources that were in the chat tonight. So please click on that link and just take that quick little survey to help us inform these educator gatherings in the future. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have other stuff that you'd like to add, like we mentioned, on any of those 4 questions or anything at all on the topics tonight, please send that email and recorders wherever you typed up your notes. Please email us, and that's at musictherapyfaculty@gmail.com. Music Therapy Faculty is all one word, @gmail.com. So thank you, and please be sure to save the date for our next event. That'll be April 12th, and that'll be the topic on CBMT exam. So that's it for us for tonight. We'll see you all on April 12th. Have a good rest of your night, everyone.